Elizabeth, go ahead and hit record. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. We are so honored that you've joined Can Do Links to Learning. We love this opportunity to come together virtually, to learn, to understand, to grow, there is space to have some dialogue and some questions. So we welcome you. Before we officially get started, or we want to start in a good way, is we want to just take a moment and press pause and acknowledge the goodness of Creator. When that sun rose in the east, that is Creator meeting us for another day and whatever unravels for us in this day. So the day's almost halfway over. You know what has happened, and give thanks for the goodness that you've experienced already in this day. I, for one, am personally excited about learning about our language, and I'm excited to hear from our guest speakers today. So there's so many things to be grateful for. So we just extend this deep gratitude to Creator, for this day, for this moment, for this opportunity, to come together as a virtual community. So hi, Creator. Thank you for all the good gifts that have been given to us, the gift of land, the gift of community, the gift of all our relations. And we think, I have a rabbit that's always near my place. So I always have conversations with that rabbit. The gift of a new month here, and the season that we're still in, this winter season. So we give thanks for all of these amazing things that Creator has given to us. And we are also thankful for you joining us today. So today's conversation is a really, really important one, honoring Indigenous language as a foundation for economic and business development in Indigenous communities. Language is the foundation of who we are and what we do, and in our ceremonies, and how we live our lives as Indigenous people. So I think that this topic is vital and important. So the strength and resiliency of our Indigenous languages in Canada is a foundation of how we are to connect to one another, and the wahkōtowin, a relationship that ensue. So in today's session, you will learn about the importance of honoring Indigenous languages as a foundation for economic and business development in Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. You will learn about the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and how the impact of contact with a new economic worldview affected the roles within Indigenous communities. So in the Cree language, we will explore wahkōtowin, building relationships as a foundational basis with Indigenous communities. And I really believe it is all about relationship. We're relational beings. That is how Creator made us to be. So we got Charlotte and we got Joseph joining us. So Charlotte is joining us from Rosetown, Saskatchewan. And Joseph, you are joining us from somewhere outside, I think, of Meadow Lake, but I think you'll let us know. So I'll give a quick introduction to our guest speakers, because we're here to listen to them. And then I'm going to pass this mic. So Charlotte is a registered band member of the Montreal Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. She loves working with Indigenous communities and building capacity and empowering all people with the true history of our past while working towards a brighter and healthier future. She's a third-year PhD student in the University of Victoria. I'm so proud of you. That's amazing. And specializing in Indigenous language revitalization. Yes. She is a speaker, reader, and writer of the Cree language Woodland TH dialect, and has also been a university instructor using materials written in the Plains Cree Y dialect. She says she assists my First Nation with developing Cree language materials along with other fluent speakers, and she's part of a team that developed and continues to update the Circle of Indigenous Languages website, which is remarkable. She also hosts a Sunday morning coffee circle using the Cree language, conversational Cree, I believe with Joseph. And she's going to tell us a little bit more, because I think that this is a great opportunity if you were looking to connect with and learn your language. This might be a circle for you. So she'll tell us more about that. Now on to Joseph. Is an award-winning Plains Woodland Naytowhow Cree interdisciplinary artist from the Sturgeon Lake First Nation Band in Saskatchewan. His generosity and compassion for sharing cultural knowledge makes him much sought after speaker, performer, facilitator, educator, and outdoor educator for adults and children alike, locally, regionally, and internationally. So a star is amongst us. A longtime resident of Saskatoon, he has been playing music and telling stories, both tall and short, for over 35 years. Wow. So we have remarkable guests in our virtual community today. So they're going to talk. There's going to be a time for any questions. Feel free to use that chat box if you have any questions or comments along the way. I will absolutely make note of them. And just a little housekeeping item, at the end, there will be an evaluation link sent to you after today's presentation. And if you fill that out, your name will be entered to win, I believe it's a $100 Visa gift card. I love it. So we'd love to hear your feedback after today's presentation. All right, so I'm so honored. We are so honored that you very busy people have carved a moment out of your schedule to lend your voice to today's topic. So I'm going to pass this virtual mic off to you. I honor you. I lift my hands to you and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Niga big swanats though. I'll just talk for a little bit and then I'll pass it over to Joe to do a bit of an introduction and just give you a bit of background on how this evolved and how we got to where we are today. You know, sitting on a Zoom call at 4:10 p.m. On February 1st, 2022, and what the history was that actually is behind the behind the scenes work. So I've been attending Can-Do and then all the Can-Do sessions since 2020. And then prior to that, I was sitting on the Sask First Nation Economic Development Network and, just really learning a lot about economic development, business development. And then my life kind of took a sideways turn and off I went to University of Victoria to start doing a PhD program in Indigenous Language Revitalization. So I think it was in November, there was a call for papers. And so I got a hold of Elizabeth and I said, is there anybody that, I haven't seen anything, but is there any interest in Indigenous language and how it connects to economic business development? And I said, yeah, nobody's ever done it, but nobody's ever presented it either. So let's go ahead with offering it. And that's kind of where it started off from. And I was telling them earlier, I said, it's like Christmas morning. I said, I've just been so excited with, all the material and getting the PowerPoint together, getting resources for you to follow up with. And then as I'm doing that, I was like, Joe and I are doing the Cree Coffee group on Sunday mornings. And so I in Dokagwitsmag, I said, do you want to come over and do you want to come and help me and we can do this presentation together? So that's sort of how it happens, and it just happens organically because and I like what you said earlier, Michelle, we're on time and it's about time, that language is front and center. And so with that, I just want to say we're going to have a really good time in the session. And I'll turn it over to Joe to do a bit of an introduction.
Thank you for inviting me here, Charlotte and Michelle. This place I'm staying at is called Fowler Lake. It's a beautiful cabin. It's a business here, but run by some friends that I know here, Paul Hospital and Donna Kay. It's a mixed couple. She's Métis and he's Polish. So they invited me to come here to essentially talk similar topic that we're going to be talking about, economics, but within the education area. But I, from Saskatoon, Ochinia, my First Nation community is Sturgeon Lake First Nation. I'm really happy to be from there. We've had our difficulties, but for the most part, we've gotten through those difficulties and have a really ship-shape kind of economic, educational, health strategy, social development. You know, everything is, we still have the problems, but at least we have them under control through intelligent people, educated people. So that's been happening back in my home community. And we, I mote the mahom nihia when nihia uita, when there's terms that I'll probably share that I'm familiar with, that we use to identify like how we understand, you know, the economics, the skill and the working part of, you know, our lives, you know, business end of it. So thank you for listening. That's a little brief introduction.
Tinigin Joseph. I've got a PowerPoint we're just going to use a PowerPoint to guide us. It's not going to be word for word, and it's not anything like that. So we'd like to have time for interaction as well. So, you know, I'll show the PowerPoint slide, and then we'll go in and out of video so that you don't feel like you're locked in to a presentation that you can't get up and walk around. Waskawig, you know, get up and move around. If it's been sitting for a long time, it's not good for us to sit that long. So we can't see you on the screen anyway. So you do whatever you want. Nimi do negamo, you know, dance around, stay around, you know, do whatever you want to keep yourself entertained while we're entertaining you on the side. So I'm just gonna start by sharing the screen. Here is our beautiful presentation. I was telling Michelle, I said, you know, these remind me of beads. So in my mind, I'm showing you some beadwork, and that's really, you know, where we start off from. And, you know, I see Michelle's got beautiful earrings on, you know, others in the room might have other jewelry that you're wearing too, or other things that are beaded. And that's, you know, one of the very basics of our communities is that we always create things. We're always in the business of creating. We were born entrepreneurs. So doing business, having economics, that was always in our blood and in our communities. Before we get started, I know Michelle had started with a land acknowledgement as well. And you know, we want to acknowledge our gratitude and just say thanks for the land and territory that we're broadcasting from. In Saskatchewan is where we're coming from, but I know people are from other places. And all of those places are home to First Nations that have lived in harmony and cared for Kigawi Nawaski. So Kigawi Nawaski is our mother, the earth, since time immemorial. And all of those lands are also home to the Métis Nation. So, you know, in the morning when we get up and we acknowledge the day, we acknowledge that we have land and that we are very, very rich in our culture and in our language, wherever we wake up from. This session is this little picture that I found here really for me depicts what we're doing today. So, you know, we're joining hands, we're connecting with one another, and our future really as a whole, as a country, it will be informed, the temperature, the gauge in which we are taking the wellness of our future, of the country as a whole, is really informed by the health and vitality of our Indigenous languages. So the big square, yeah, it's, if I can still speak my language, if there's a few words, or if I'm, you know, working on developing my understanding of the language, that's going to be health for the country as a whole. So we would like you to think about, you know, how else can I look at what I do? How can I look through that lens called Indigenous language? And how can that change how I see the world and what my role is in the world? I believe, and we believe, that our greatest strength lies in our ability to be humble and to be open-minded. The elders that we have in our lives have role models for us. You know, the greatest elders and the greatest teachers I've had have also been the most humble. You know, they're not the ones that are boastful. They're the humble people who are wanting to make a change and make a difference. So in our sessions, like Michelle said, you know, we're going to learn a bit about the history of Indigenous people, including these ways of thinking. You know, it's a worldview. So Papal Bull, the Doctrine, Terra Nullius, I want to teach you about a new economic worldview that affected the roles that we had here on Turtle Island with our communities, our nations, and then to also think about the strength and resilience of language. So, what does language have? And we have languages across the country, and I'm going to show you a map that depicts that. And then we're going to talk about wahkōtowin and wahkōtowin as a foundation to any kind of development, economic, business, personal. It's all tied into these two concepts. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that as I go through the slide. The first piece that I think about when I think about economic and business development that is recent is the TRC calls to action. So that's action number 92. And there's a whole bunch of pieces that are tied into the calls to action. And the very first one is for the corporate sector to adopt the United Nations on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that's a legal document. It's an international recognition. And it really takes our rights as Indigenous people and puts them forefront on the international stage. And so that helps us, and for many different reasons in Canada, sometimes Canada hasn't recognized the United Nations Declaration. Sometimes they've been resistant to doing that. And so we've had to take issues to that forefront, to the forum, and bring different issues up that need to be addressed at the international level, so that Canada as a country and the United States and New Zealand, Australia, that they will take the Indigenous people's rights seriously and give them their respect. There's a couple of short videos, and I'm the type of teacher that likes to connect it to a speaker, connect it to somebody. So the Papal Bulls and the Doctrine of Discovery and the concept of terra nullius, those are really important ones that frame our understanding of where we're at. There's two videos here. We're not going to watch both of them, but I'm going to share with you the first one, because I think it's important to know what is it and why is it important to me? Why do I need to know that? When we're working with communities, we can actually have a good conversation with them. And we can also inform our families, inform ourselves, because that's where it all starts. Just 1 minute here. I think you should all be familiar with the speaker who's in this short video. I really enjoy her talk and her presentation on it.
I'm curious to know, because, for example, we have treaties, government implementations, and these kind of like are man-made efforts to somewhat bring healing to something that could be so deeply spiritually rooted. I'm wondering, is there a space for us as humans to look to something bigger to ourselves, like God, and finding reconciliation? Is there space for that?
I think there is, and if I can get quite specific with you for a second, there's something that most people have never heard of that's sometimes called the Doctrine of Discovery, which we really should call the Doctrine of Domination, that came about by the popes in 1491, 92, 93, and later even in the 1450s. But this is a long time ago. People don't put it together that when Indigenous people in the world were discovered, when was it? In Europe. It was the Inquisition. Nobody ever puts that together. There were serial killers on the thrones of Europe. Henry VIII, Vlad the Impaler, that's what you call Dracula, Ferdinand and Isabella, and the church. Forget Christianity for a second, which is very beautiful. Christ, very beautiful. But the racketeers who got a hold of Christianity, they put out this thing called the Doctrine of Discovery, which we rephrase as the Doctrine of Domination, which said that if explorers from Portugal, Holland, France, England, Spain, if they're out exploring, they don't want to step on each other's toes. So the Pope says, if explorers are out discovering things and they come upon a land that is inhabited by people who are non-Christians, it is your duty to kill them, enslave them, or convert them. And if you convert them, then their job is to work for us. Of course, they were saying work for Christ. No, it's not how it turned out. So the Doctrine of Discovery is something that we have to deal with in Canada because it's embedded in Canadian law. It's embedded in American law, in the law of all of the countries who were colonized by those 5 European countries. And it's embedded in their laws, and it's still referred to in the 2000s. It's not a thing of the past. So it's not a matter of going back and learning all of history. It's not that we need to get across. What we need to get across is that we need to do away with the doctrine of discovery.
So this is, I think, when we take a look at the foundation of, where is Canada's history? What is it based on? It's based on that very principle. So the philosophy and belief systems that granted the concepts of superiority and the right to make decisions on behalf of the church and state in the best interest of Indigenous populations for their better good. And so the idea of having Indigenous individuals who didn't have a form of worship that were the same as theirs, so then they were considered to be without a soul. And if you were without a soul, then you really needed to be converted so that you could have a life. And so the whole concept of the Doctrine of Discovery and Terra Nullius, that the land wasn't being used, are basis, and like Buffy said, that the basis of the legal foundations, and the legal foundations also influence the rest of the history. So the legislation. Why else would the Hudson's Bay Company be granted a fur trade monopoly by King Charles of England? So, what's the impact of the fur trade? When we take a look at history, and my first studies were in our history, looking at our history, how did things get to be where they were? I really looked back and, spoke to lots of elders and really thought, we had a thriving economy prior to contact. We went, all the way from North America, Central America, South America. And, there's been lots of forums, international Indigenous business forums that speak to that we shared, that we had business, we had governance, we had laws, we had education, we had our languages, we had forms of worship. So all of those were intact, they were thriving. We already had treaties, we made treaties with other nations. And so in 1670, we take a look at how did this new economic worldview that was granted by a foreign king on Indigenous land around the fur trade and the control that happened around that. How did that change our economic worldview and our economic society here in Canada, what we now know to be Canada? And how did the influence of alcohol in trading infiltrate the family systems and infiltrate, separating the role of women who were integral to traditional economies from the fur trade economy? So there was devastating impact of that happened after that. So there's a period of 200 years between the fur trade and 1869, 1870, when the sale of Rupert's land happened. And there were four initial provinces. There was Upper Canada, Lower Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. So they were four provinces that were interested in purchasing Rupert's land, but they had no money to buy it with. And so they actually had to take out a loan. So the first corporations, the first companies, the first individuals that started the Dominion of Canada started with a loan. So they had no money at all to buy this land called Rupert's land. So they had to borrow money, and the deed of surrender, the link to the deed of surrender, I've included in here because it's important to know, how did Canada start? What's the history of Canada? It didn't just start in 1867 with the British North America Act. It didn't start with the Royal Proclamation of 1763, but the Royal Proclamation is important to recognize that we are sovereign nations, that we had sovereignty as nations, as Indian tribes. And then treaty making, 1870. So treaty making is happening in the prairie provinces where we are now, but at the same time, the Indian Act is being consolidated, all the earlier versions of the Indian Act. So when we take a look at, and that's where residential schools and restrictions for permit system and the path system come into play. There's a short video here, I'm not going to show it, but it's something that you can follow up on your own, called the Justice for Aboriginal Peoples. It just takes you through a really quick overview of the history of Canada and all those different parts that make a difference. They have an incredible impact on where we are today. These are the Aboriginal languages in Canada, and so we have a variety of Aboriginal languages. And I'm finding out in my school, in my studies, in my doctoral work, I'm like, oh my goodness, like there's so many languages across the country. I've only ever focused on Cree. I was very Cree-centric, but I've now opened my eyes to other languages across the country, in the US and in other parts of the world. But how can we revitalize, how can we strengthen and protect Indigenous languages? We can't do it on our own. You know, it's not possible for one person to do it. But all of us here, you know, we all have connections and contacts to strengthen Aboriginal language, to bring it into our workplace, to bring it into our life, to reawaken the language, because it's never a dead language. You know, when people say, oh, the language is lost, the language is dead, it's just sleeping. It's never a lost language. And so, you know, this is from 2016. So we see, you know, all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, far north, there's our languages are here, they're vibrant. If we add it on, you know, down south into the US, there's also an abundance of languages in the south. There's a couple of videos that I thought were really good. I'm not going to show them, but one is called Cree Language Videos with Solomon Rat. And then the other one is really quite good. It's called Kukum Rap with CBC Original Voices. And you'll recognize some Saskatchewan Kokums in that rap video. And I'm just going to turn it over to, and then there's a couple of other videos that I thought were really good for you to learn or to hear about from Anton and Onawa. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Joe and ask him to share anything that he would like to share. Gidi, go, Joe.
Okay, tatamskat na nas kamono tagapi Pigs kwan wa pigwitsing go yanap sis kanihio yani kami nagkwits to tamo hakota. Tatigi organ to tamigo mat that's kids natum isn't to tama kanihio ya. Matsun. I guess everything can be all kind of centered around that word, the matsuin, you know, life as a life-giving force, whatever it is you're doing, right? The matsuin is a huge word. It's a life force that we were given by you know, Naytowhow, once you're born. And I noticed you showed the fire there, and that always brings, you know, as soon as you see an image from my place, or if you're an Indigenous person, you think about the wahkōtowin, you know, you think about that one fire, that belongs to all people. And in Cree, they always seem to put things not like, as Charlotte, as you were saying, not from a Cree-centric point of view, but they understand that there are other humans. I mean, today I find that, you know, other humans exist, you know, so they're also part of that fire. So you can't ignore that, you know, you got to understand, I see no big one people, one fire. And I'm a Naytowhow, when you talk about wahkōtowin, you know, and first thing is I had to know who I was. So when you're going through a residential school, you forget about who you were. You know, it's beaten out of you, or it's educated out of you through another culture, another lens, you know. So Naytowhow is who I am. And that basically, sometimes they understand it. As Simon Kaito had said, is we are the four people of the four, number four. We're governed by that number four. Everything works around the cycle of four, or, you know, works within that belief that all life works in fours. For example, if you came to me, you would come and sweat with me 4 times, whether it's 4 days or whether it's once every week, or, you know, within, as long as you complete that cycle of 4 sweats, then you've gone through a whole healing cycle, whatever it is you came there to heal for. And sometimes you may need more if it's a threatening, you know, illness that you're experiencing. For example, cancer, those sort of more killer kind of things, or COVID, right? There's, what did I just recently hear, that there is some remedy for COVID, within our Indigenous healing ceremonies. There is actual, we don't have to depend on that. So not that I'm saying we're anti-vaxxers or anyone is anti-vaxxer. That's a whole issue unto itself, right? But there's, Judy Bear is one person that I met who didn't get abducted like myself. He wasn't kidnapped, and taken to a residential school. He was raised by old people. And she passed away this past year, so we lost an international library, you could say. We lost a library of one person who was raised as a child to speak Cree, to think Cree, to act Cree, to know the philosophy of Cree. She knew all of that because the old people kept her back deliberately so they could teach her the stories, teach her, all the things that they wanted her to know, including the language, including about the different cycles within the journey of our life from sunrise to sunset. She was taught all that. So she was taught about the 4 hills of life. You from 0 to 25 is the first stage of our life, and then from 25 to 50, and then from 50 to 75, and then 75 to 100. That's that's a cycle of life. And within those 4 stages of life, there are things that you need to know to prepare for each stage. So there's a lot of things that happen between 0 and 25. You're no scapios, an apprentice, or you're a learner within the women's circle. When Roland Duquette told me one time, between 0 and 12, the women look after the young boys and girls, between 0 and 12. That's a lot of years, but then they instill the respect that they need to know about how to treat women and how to understand the women in the community. So I thought that was very beautiful. And then you go from there, from 12 years old, you start separating and going to work with women teachers and male teachers. Sometimes they call them kiseoskapios, and they're like the next level to the apprentice. So there's the apprentice, and then there's the instructor. So we have that in our system, right? And so you go from one stage to the other, and you become an escapios, and you serve at feasts, you serve everywhere. And often there's no, what payoff? The payoff is spiritual and cultural and knowledge, right? It's not monetary often. You're lucky maybe to get, some cigarettes or tobacco, if you're a smoker, or if you understand what tobacco is for, as an offering to give back to the land and all that, So it's a different worldview when you think about it, and a lot of people have lost or forget that sometimes. How do they integrate that into their business world, in their economic, strategy? How do they? But part of it